Okay, boxing fanatics, welcome to episode 37 of the podcast. And I'm delighted once again to be joined by Mr. Oscar Pick. As we discussed, well, I think it's fair to say a bit of a surprise last night in some ways, in a few ways, really. I remember off camera, Oscar, when we were talking about this fight, it's fair to say neither of us was really, crazy about it. We weren't overly looking forward to it. Both men have a history of um, some, stinking the place out is a bit harsh, but a history of, not the greatest performances. Both have kind of been spoilers in the past, and maybe not been overly exciting. But I'm happy to say that yeah, last night was a great fight. It was very entertaining, and it seems to be the case of British title fights. I can't list them all, but in my head I'm just thinking whenever there's a British title fight, it tends to be a bit of like a good scrap. It's like when the title's on the line, it kind of brings the best out of both fighters. And I think that happened to an extent last night. Both fights put on. It was entertaining. It was very very entertaining. It was a good fight in my opinion. And ultimately, Jeamie TKV getting the upset because I think in the I was looking in the preview and the odds, and yeah, I mean, Frazer Clarke was a massive favourite going into that, which was surprising because I never thought the disparity was that big, but a massive favourite. Anyway, TKV gets the win, captures the British title. Yeah. So what's your initial reaction to last night?
Well, to be honest with you, mate, I think I've got a completely different opinion about it, which is a bit of a first, I suppose. Yeah, basically, well, what you're saying there about it being a really great fight and stuff, I've seen a few people saying similar comments, and I have to say, from my perspective, I just didn't see it that way at all. I think if you take away the late drama that we had in the 11th round, it was a bit of a it was a bit of an ugly fight. I thought it was a bit messy, and I mean, I'll be honest, Jeamie TKV is someone who I'm not going to be, staying up all night to watch anytime soon. I think the majority of fights he's been involved with, he's looking to spoil. I know to an extent it's his tactics, but he really is quite eager to kind of clinch on the inside. And I just don't think there's really an inside game for him. I think he's actually got not bad footwork for a heavyweight.
Mm.
Like he's surprisingly quite light on his feet for a big guy like him. But whenever Frazer Clarke's trying to close down that distance, he's just always tying him up. And I have to say, I can't leave Frazer Clarke out of that conversation because I thought his clinching was pretty excessive as well. I thought both guys, they were probably thinking about the gas tank more than anything. You kind of see in the middle rounds, I thought Clarke especially looked really fatigued at that point, and he was looking to hold a lot. And I didn't think he really needed to because I thought Clarke got off to a decent start. I thought, you know, he sort of came forward with a few really eye-catching attacks. So I sort of thought to myself, wow, we could be looking at an early finish here. And then Clarke just kind of, I don't know, like he just fell into this trap of just, you know, clinching and just not using his jab. Um, and it just made for a bit of a made for a bit of a scrappy affair, I thought. Um, and then yeah, obviously I mentioned the 11th round where I thought TKV hurt Clarke pretty badly. And obviously we saw what happened with Clarke against Fabio Wardley,
Mm.
that really brutal knockout. And I have to say, I don't think there's anyone who can really fully recover from that experience because that must have been, quite traumatic to a certain extent. And obviously, yeah, it was a devastating finish from Fabio Wardley that night. So I think when I saw Clarke kind of wobbling all over the place in that 11th round, I had genuine fear, in terms of his health beyond this fight. And I found myself almost when he got back to the corner, he looked on unsteady legs, and immediately he seemed concussed. I was actually begging his corner not to send him out for the 12th round because I thought, you're really rolling the dice there. Like if Jeamie TKV connected with a few meaningful shots that round, like Frazer Clarke could have been in a really, really bad way. Um, so there was that side of things which I don't know, it was quite difficult to watch, I think, at that point. And you have to think to yourself, what can Frazer Clarke do from here? Because he's shown, tremendous heart and bravery to obviously, slug it out through that contest, but also come back from the Fabio Wardley knockout. But then, losing to Jeamie TKV at this level, um, not only does that say a lot about where Frazer Clarke is at in his career, but also in terms of not wanting to risk any further damage in the sport. I think Frazer Clarke has got to have some serious conversations with those closest to him. Um, but yeah, obviously Jeamie TKV, he got his hand raised. He kind of did what he needed to do throughout the fight. I didn't think it was pretty. Certainly not one that I'd be going back to watch. But yeah, it's interesting that you found it quite an entertaining scrap. Which, to be fair, I've seen quite a lot of people on social media saying that. Which I think it might have been one of those fights that sort of divided opinion maybe in the boxing world. But yeah, it weren't really one for me, to be honest.
Yeah, no, it's fair enough. For me, it was entertaining because I'm not saying it was technically the most beautiful fight I've ever seen. Obviously not. I just felt it was entertaining because both men were kind of trading in the ring, and there was a bit of drama there and stuff like that. So by that kind of standpoint, I thought it was quite entertaining, and it kind of came down to the wire as well. So yeah, I found it entertaining to be fair. I think yeah, like you said, Fraser Clarke did start well. He came out fast, and I think that is actually a positive for Fraser Clarke. He does seem to come out very fast, but like you're saying, that gas tank, I don't know what it is. He didn't look in bad physical shape at all, Fraser Clarke, to be fair. He looked in good shape for his standards, I think. Quite toned and stuff. And I don't know, it just seems to be an issue. He's not that muscle bound. We've seen that muscle bound fighters tend to tire. He's not overly muscle bound. He weighs a lot. He's a heavy guy. Was it 270 pounds? And it just seems to he can't really take that weight over the distance. And he did slow down massively, and that's ultimately what cost him. Jeamie TKV, I mean, physically, yeah, he looked quite bad. I think he looks better against Adelaide, but his tank is better than Clark's, despite not looking as body beautiful, so to speak. TKV, to be fair, I don't know. I'd like to get your opinion on this, but I think maybe his boxing skills are a little bit underrated. A little bit. I think he is fairly slick on the inside, actually, to an extent. Like his footwork is good. I like some of the punches he threw. He done, some nice left hook, left to the body, and then came up with the left hook. He done that a few times, and that was quite nice. To be fair, he does spoil. He's a bit scrappy in there. He did get a point deducted for low blow as well. He's never going to be like the most, aesthetically pleasing fighter to watch. But I would maybe even say his boxing skills maybe a little bit underrated, even when you consider the fight he had against David Adelaide, where he was spoiling, but he was winning. He was winning the fight before the incident. And yeah, Fraser Clarke. I mean, yeah, I agree. It's hard to see where he goes from here. When you're an Olympic medalist, I think people expect big things from you. People expect you to at least you shouldn't be failing at British level. You shouldn't be struggling this much. And yeah, his career has been a struggle so far. It's fair to say. And yeah, the Wardley knockout. I mean, yeah, who can recover for that? Realistically, that was one of the most brutal knockouts I think I've ever seen. I don't think I ever remember a fighter having a dent in his head. Like, that's crazy. So if you were and yeah, good point about the corner. I remember watching that Angel Fernandez, and he was actually telling him like, I'm going to pull you out here. I'm going to pull you out here. Fraser Hart in La La Land, to be fair, he done very well to come out of the 12th round and, hold it together and not get knocked out, to be fair. I don't think Jeamie TKV is the biggest puncher in the world, but still. Um, if you're his team now, Clark, I mean, the R word gets thrown around a lot in boxing now, but he's 34 years old. Should he be thinking about retirement now? I mean, it's really hard to see where he's going to go from here. Will he just be recycled and just kind of fight, more domestic fighters and the likes of, I don't know, Solomon Dakers, Dave Allen? I don't know. I guess off the back of last night, what's the first thought that comes to your head? Retirement or rebuild?
I think retirement. I know it's become a bit of a taboo or a bit of a touchy subject where you've got people like ourselves who are calling for certain fighters to retire. But I think in a situation like this, where we know the history, we know the context, and we know, as you quite rightly say, the Fabio Wardley knockout was shocking, shockingly brutal. And as you say, no one can. There's very few people on the planet who could cover from that. I'm not convinced anyone could really fully recover from that experience. And I think would Frazer Clarke before the Fabio Wardley fight have beaten Jeamie TKV? I guess we'll never find out. But all we know is at this stage in Frazer Clarke's career, and let's not forget, you obviously had that long amateur career, been boxing most of his life, I think. And I think he's like 35, 36 years old now, something like that. So already you're seeing he's not in his physical prime. Um, he's, you know, is there an element of vulnerability there? I didn't think that became apparent in the rounds leading up to the 11th. I thought Frazer Clarke actually, he looked quite assertive at times. He looked, as you say, physically strong. But then that 11th round, as I said, like I just kind of almost got a flashback to that Fabio Wardley fight when I saw him wobbling around the ring, and I genuinely, because Frazer Clarke's a really nice guy, like really nice guy. I genuinely, was sort of fearing the worst for him at that moment, and that's why I was so adamant that the corner shouldn't have sent him out for that 12th round because you don't know what would have happened. So I think from what I've seen in that fight, I wouldn't really want to see Frazer Clarke in another fight. And to be fair, you know, take out the Fabio Wardley knockout, take out the 11th round in the JBTKV fight. Where does he actually go from here? Because as you say, when you're losing to a fighter like Jeamie TKV, what options are there for you at the minute? I mean, as you say, he's an Olympic medalist, bronze medalist. So yeah, I don't think so he's fallen short at British level. And below that, he'd just be rolling the dice every single time because if he's involved in a somewhat competitive or somewhat 50-50 matchup, then he's always going to be risking his health in there. And I know all fighters risk their health, but when you got someone like Frazer Clarke, who's, as I said, we've seen the deterioration, I guess you could say. I think it's a real risk at this point, and it's a risk that's not worth taking, in my opinion.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Sometimes these fighters need to be saved from themselves, and that might be one of those situations here. And also, just want to point out that even before the knockout of Wardley, the second fight, I think sometimes we forget how brutal the first fight was because
Mm.
I remember Frazer Clarke was literally collapsing on a stool at the end. He put so much. That was probably, I mean, that's probably one of the best performances of his career, to be fair. Many people thought he won that fight against Wardley. And when you look at it in hindsight now, when you see what Wardley's gone on to do, that was actually a very good performance by him. He done really well that fight. I remember Wardley's nose was busted up, and no one's really busted Wardley up like that really since, to be fair. So it's in hindsight, he done really, really, really well. I think the problem is with retirement as well. Is like we don't know what their financial situation is, and this is the saddest thing about boxing, and we see it all the time. It's like it's very easy to say retire, retire, but we don't know what their finances is. Like do they need to continue? Are they financially set? In fairness to Frazer Clarke, he is what's the word? He speaks well. He speaks well, so he can definitely have a job in punditry, and I've seen him do a few things already for Sky Sports and stuff. So and I think the guy has a career outside of boxing. To be fair, he does speak really well. Frazer Clarke does come across like a really nice guy. So yeah, maybe it's not the end of the world for him to retire because I think there are avenues out there for him. But and whatever way you cut it, I just don't see him making like crazy money from boxing at this point. It's fair to say, at that British level, you're not gonna make that, I don't know, that really life changing money. So that's something that yeah, him and his team need to figure out. Really, I mean, yeah, 34. He's 34, but still, he's still going towards that kind of age where yeah, it's hard to say. It's hard to say. Okay, what about TKV. So I've said in my opinion he's maybe a little bit underrated. He's a little bit younger at 32. Like I've said previously, he was on his way to being David Adelaide. Does he have any kind of future? I mean, in terms of like, is it beyond the realms of possibility for TKV to now push on and maybe win a European title, maybe get mixed in with like I don't know a world level opponent, someone like I can't think of the name off the top of my head, but someone on the outskirts of world level. Does he have any chance, or has he hit his ceiling basically, Jeamie TKV?
I think he's hit his ceiling. I can't see him ever competing at world level. You're talking about, well, I've seen a few suggestions of a potential Dave Allen fight. I think that's a fairly winnable fight. I think a bit of a pick 'em really. Him and Dave Allen, similar level fighters, both on the domestic scene. So I think that could be a competitive matchup. I've also seen Richard Rackball's name being mentioned, which could be a fairly interesting fight. Although I'd actually heavily favour Rackball in that fight, just in terms of him being, a lot sharper, um, just having a little bit more variety to his skill set, I think. Yeah, I don't think that would be a good option for Jeamie TKV. I could actually see him potentially getting knocked out in that. But yeah, he could mix it with the likes of Dave Allen, Solomon Dakers, maybe. You've got a decent little pool of domestic heavyweights there. So I think that's definitely his level, and I can't see him really progressing beyond that, to be honest. I don't know what you think.
I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued because I think with Jamie TKV, he does sort of surprise a little bit. Do you know what I mean? Because I think even the David Adelaide fight, I don't think people thought that was going to be competitive. I think people thought he was going to get knocked out. Like I said, he was, whatever tactic he was using, he was still on his way. Well, he was winning rounds, before the incident, and he wasn't meant to win last night as well. So he's kind of got that underdog kind of mentality about him. He is very tough. He is. He is. Yeah, he's very tough in there. He doesn't give up. I suppose he's got like good resolve. I know he lost early in his career to like an obscure fighter as well. He's done well to come back. To be honest, TKV. I mean, that was a bad loss when you think about it. I think it was like York Hall to some very obscure fighter. He's done well. I guess I'm just intrigued. I'd like to see what he can do, I suppose. But I think on the domestic scene is actually where the money is. Actually, if we're thinking about that, like the Dave Allen fight is definitely the biggest money fight on the table. Dave Allen's coming off that loss to Makhmudov. And I think I think that door's still open for Dave Allen. He's always wanted to win the British title. I don't think he'd be looking at Jamie TKV as the hardest opponent ever. So maybe that fight does make sense, really. TKV Allen could do decent numbers, whether it's on BBC or the Zone or wherever it is. So maybe that does make sense. React is an interesting one because he's a little bit like, in my opinion, a bit of an unknown quantity at heavyweight. We saw him at cruiserweight. He did well at cruiserweight. He was maybe unfortunate, not I wouldn't say unfortunate. I mean, couldn't quite win a world title, but he's a decent at heavyweight so far. So that's another, I guess, potential. So I guess to answer your question, I'm just intrigued. Let's see. Let's see. I wouldn't write him off completely. European level is not. It's a level above, but it's not. It's not world level. I'm not obviously not going to say it's
Who,
being like.
who would you say is sort of a European level at heavyweight? Like in terms of the kind of more familiar names, who would you say is on that level? Maybe like a Makhmudov? Is
Yeah,
that European
Magmudo.
level?
I'd say. See, I'd say Vianello, but I'd say Vianello is actually higher than European level.
Mm.
I think that's what I think. So probably maybe Makhmudov. Makhmudov's probably a good shout. Who else comes to mind? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. What did you think of BBC? Basically, what did you think of that? Do you think this is a good thing for boxing? Because obviously, the zone is monopolizing boxing almost. You got all the major. Well, I say that you got Netflix coming through. Obviously, you got Queensbury and Matchroom on the zone. But what do you think about BBC? Like, would you like to see more cards on BBC based on free terrestrial TV? Do you think that's a good thing for boxing?
I'm glad you asked this question actually, because well, first of all, I think BBC boxing is a great thing. Any opportunity to be able to, watch live boxing that's not behind a paywall, I'm going to stamp your hand off for that all day long. But in terms of the actual live broadcast for this fight, I'd have to say I wasn't very impressed at all. I thought, um, well, did you watch it live in terms of like the commentary and everything? Do you
Yeah,
have
yeah.
like the commentary? Yeah. So obviously you had is it Ron McIltosh
Oh
doing the
yeah, yeah,
commentary?
yeah. He did have a good
And
quote, which I'll just say quickly. What did he
no,
say?
go on.
He said it was a good one. It was like Clark is being taken to the corner like a parent of a toddler or something like that.
Did he?
Yeah, he said something like that. I'm pretty sure it said something along
I
those
didn't hear that
lines.
bit, but I know he came out with a lot of outlandish stuff, and I have to say, I thought his commentary was really poor throughout the whole fight. And even in the fight before with Fran Hennessy, I thought you
Mm.
know, I like George Groves as a pundit. To be fair, I'm not too sure whether commentary is where he kind of excels, but with Ron McIltosh, I don't want to completely bury him, but I'd say that the standard of commentary, from his point of view, like with him was really bad. I thought he was just kind of he just fell into the trap of just doing a bit of cheerleading when it wasn't even necessary. Like I know some people found the fight entertaining, but it was even during the moments where not a lot was happening. He was just going. He must have said, "Oh, this is torrid two-way action" about a million times, and he just kept repeating some of the same phrases over and over again. And I have to say, I think the commentary, it definitely adds or takes away something from the actual view and experience. I thought it definitely took something away from it. From my perspective, I also didn't really like Steve Bunce on there. I thought I don't know. I thought again he was just kind of you know maybe doing a little bit of cheerleading in terms of just hyping it up to such an extent, like calling it a British classic or whatever. And I just didn't think it really warranted that. It just you need a bit of balance on a
Mhm.
broadcast team, and I just didn't think it was there at all. It's funny. I was actually watching a bit of the top tier card earlier. Johnny Clark that was on DAZN. I don't know if you know top tier, but it's a good promotion and they do good shows. And it was Andy Clark and Alex Steedman doing
Okay.
commentary,
Hmm.
and that watching that was like night and day compared to the BBC broadcast last night. So I think there's yeah, there's a lot of room for improvement there. In terms of BBC box, I think it's a great thing, but from a broadcast perspective, I didn't like it at all.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, first of all, I'm going to agree with the free part for sure. I think the amount of pay-per-views on the zone are just is a joke at this point. To be honest, I think it's ridiculous. It's not good for the sport. Like every 5 minutes is a pay-per-view. This new pay-per-view model on the zone, shocking. I think to be honest. So in that regard, yeah, I definitely back the BBC. I think it's love. I think there's something nice about it being free on terrestrial TV. It's something just a bit like old school about it, and just kind of. Yeah, it just brings in a big viewership. So yeah, I'm definitely for BBC, and I'm definitely for not monopolization of all boxing. Basically, I think we need a bit of variety because then, as fans, I think we get more for our money than whether everything's all on one platform. As for the commentary, I was looking into this to be fair, and I was looking at what basically another boxing pundit said, and I think this probably has a good point. Is that Ronald McIntosh? I think he's used to like radio
Hmm.
reporting. So he's
I was going to mention that to be fair. Yeah.
when you're reporting the radio, you need to be more like over the top, I suppose. You need to be very specific what's going on. Whereas when you can see the action, you don't need every little detail and stuff like that. So so I guess that's the point. You know what I mean? What I also say is that I mean, to be honest though, like all broadcasts, they have their issues. I mean, you got the zone, you got Tony Bellew with his biased scorecards, in front of the home fighter. Do you know what I mean? You always got a bit of like bias. There's always
I
room
was,
for
I was,
improvement. Do you know what I mean?
I
Go,
was
go
going to
on.
say quickly. I was going to say quickly. I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and I was just saying, I'm so sick and tired of hearing the same voices all the time. Like how for how long have we heard Darren Barker, Barry Jones, Adam Smith? I mean, it's just been going on way too long. I think. Like, I think we just need some fresh blood in there, really. And I was going to say something else about the BBC broadcast.
Go on.
When they did the sort of ringside interviews, or I think they interviewed Lauren Price or
Yeah,
whoever.
yeah, yeah.
I noticed the reporter was saying, "Oh, what do you think of the bout?" And he didn't call it a fight, which I thought was a little bit strange. I don't know if that's like a BBC way of kind of, you know, making it seem a little bit less
Watering it
brutal, but
down.
yeah,
Yeah.
watering it down. Yeah, yeah.
Bouts,
Uh,
not fight, bouts.
that
Yeah.
that's just a little thing I picked up on. I don't think, that's not a major thing, but yeah.
Fair enough. So you're not a fan base. Fair enough,
No,
fair enough.
I like BBC boxing, but broadcasts, yeah, definitely could be improved.
I think generally British broadcast it just needs a room for improvement. I mean Adam Smith. To be fair, I mean I think he's. I still like listening to him to be honest because I just feel like he's when he kind of the climax of the fight. I think he does do it well.
Mm.
When like Joshua knocked out Klitschko and stuff like that. I still think he's quite good at that. But I do get what you're saying. It has become. Yeah, they've been there for a while. It wouldn't be a bad thing to have some fresh blood in there. To be fair, so I mean, look, we'll see what happens with the situation of boxer. Hopefully, there is more free terrestrial TV. And I think growing up, that's what we used to be on kind of terrestrial TV. It was like these kind of British fight title fights and that kind of thing. And
I
it's a,
think it's going to be quite regular. You got Callum Simpson fighting Troy Williamson, which I don't think is a particularly great fight, but that's happening in December. And then you got Adam Azim supposed to be headlining in January on the BBC. So hopefully it's going to be quite a regular thing.
okay, so that's good then. That's good. That's I think that's good for the grassroots, and I think that's got more of a chance of bringing people in, more of a casual audience. To be fair, because most casuals are probably not going to want to pay on the zone and stuff over fighters they don't know and that kind of thing. All right, guys. Well, we're going to call it there then. Let us know your thoughts on last night's fight. Do you agree with Oscar? Do you think it was a bit overrated and it wasn't all that, or you like you like myself and thought, you know what, it wasn't beautiful boxing, but it was somewhat entertaining. As always, guys, thanks a lot for tuning in, and yeah, we'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.